Wonderful. So I'm very grateful to be a part of this ongoing conversation around the promise and peril of AI. My focal point will be focusing specifically on AI in education. And so even though there are legitimate risks and concerns when we're thinking about integrating AI into the classroom, I'm actually going to be focusing a little bit more on the promise of AI in this setting, showcasing promising examples of how we can apply AI to solve educational problems in an equitable way. So I think the big idea here, if there's anything I want you to take away from these next 10 minutes, is that we can't simply put AI in classrooms for its own sake. So we can't simply build educational AI just for the love of it, just for the fun of it. We actually need to be really intentional in shaping these technologies so they're aligned with the research evidence of what actually works in education. And so the big trend or the big principle here is that we need to connect the latest science of machine learning with the latest science of student learning. So as an example, what does the research literature actually say about effective instructional practices? And how do we design and shape AI technologies so that they're aligned with these proven practices? And that's one of the hallmark principles of an emerging field called learning engineering. We're taking this cross-disciplinary approach, pulling from the field of computer science, pulling from the field of the learning sciences, pulling from the field of the instructional design, bridging all of these different schools of thought together so we can essentially build a classroom that's aligned with research on how students can effectively learn and how teachers can effectively teach. And one example of this is a project that I was fortunate enough to work on as a part of my organization, the Learning Agency Lab. We worked on this project called the Feedback Prize, which was thinking about how do we align the latest advancements in AI to solve a really important problem in the US. So in the US, as I'm sure many of you might already know, most students lack key writing skills. So if you look at the national data, you'll see that only 1/3 of US students actually graduate from high school proficient in their writing ability. And this statistic gets even more egregious if you look at historically marginalized students, such as low-income students, students of color. This statistic actually drops to about 15%. So we have this fundamental problem where students aren't able to write effectively. But there's also this growing body of research that shows when students experience regular, timely, and formative feedback on their writing, you can actually see an improvement in their writing skills. Now, it seems like that would show, okay, problem solved, right? But unfortunately, there's another roadblock because teachers are overwhelmed with all of the student work they have to grade day in and day out. So even though research is showing it's not enough for a teacher to simply assign an A, a B, a C, a D, or an F on a student essay, teachers are also feeling overwhelmed with the grading burden. And this is where the promise of AI comes in, because AI technology, specifically automated writing evaluation systems, can support teachers in the classroom because they're able to automatically assess student writing and provide that granular, personalized, specific, and constructive feedback as an aid to teachers in evaluating student learning. So we recognize that machine learning held great promise in helping teachers evaluate student writing. And so what we decided to do was we wanted to be a part of facilitating innovation in automatic writing evaluation and assisted writing feedback tools through this project to basically make data sets and algorithms that can improve assisted writing feedback tools open access, open source. And a reason why this is a key principle in the educational arena is because if we believe education is fundamentally a public good, then educational AI should also fundamentally be a public good. And so if we create a space, a platform where different education-focused organizations, whether you're an underfunded school district in Texas or a small edtech startup in Rwanda, you all have access to these high-quality, AI-powered learning resources in spite of your resource and budget constraints. So what we did was we first curated a data set of real student essays, hundreds of thousands of student writing from across the nation. We then curated a smaller subset of essays that could adequately represent different student populations. We made sure the data set was attached to robust demographic information, like the student's race, their ethnicity, their gender, their grade level, their English language learner status, their special needs status, because this data was going to be important later on in evaluating the AI systems for bias and fairness. We then worked with researchers and teachers to create a scheme for annotating the data for different elements of student arguments. And this was important that it was a collaborative approach to keep teachers in the loop so that they can actually make sure these AI technologies are actually doing what will help them in their work. After we annotated the data set, we organized these public competitions on Kaggle.com, a major platform for data scientists, and we basically set up a public challenge where machine learning experts across the globe had to compete to train AI models on our data set to evaluate the student essays. And we had pretty impressive results. The resulting solutions were able to mimic a trained human rater in taking an essay, breaking it down into smaller chunks, and evaluating each element of a student's argument for its effectiveness. And now these algorithms are public, they're accessible, different platforms, digital learning platforms, edtech startups have access to integrate these algorithms in their tools. So that's one example, pulling on our values and thinking about democratizing access, collaboration, and building these AI technologies. Another important trend, as I'm sure many of you might also be aware of, is tuning these latest generative AI tools like ChatGPT for education-specific use cases. Now, some of my slides might be a little bit out of date, as I'm sure we have discovered the introduction of GPTs by OpenAI and the GPT store. But I think it's also important to showcase an example of how if we take these off-the-shelf tools like ChatGPT, we can't simply then put it in the hands of teachers and students, because the ChatGPT's general knowledge base is the internet, which is full of biased, inaccurate, and incomplete information about what actually works in education. So a few months ago, before GPTs and GPT Store, the big tool and framework for building applications on top of large language models was LangChain. And what we decided to do was we decided to create a special version of ChatGPT that was connected to the largest body of research literature backed by the Federal Education Agency on what actually works in education practice, programs, and policy. And we decided to customize ChatGPT in order to give evidence-based education advice to teachers, administrators, and policymakers. It was very easy to build, once again, showing how AI can be used in an accessible and equitable way. And we were able to have a decent prototype that could actually pull from research evidence of what actually works in education and give meaningful guidance to teachers and administrators from topics ranging from school discipline to school turnaround initiatives and improvement. And so I think overall, in thinking about how we want to leverage what's happening right now in AI and NLP, we have to use these generative AI tools, whether they be ChatGPT or Claude or Bard, and we have to continually give them exposure to high-quality educational data, high-quality research evidence of what actually works in different settings, in different contexts, and for different populations in order to see meaningful results, which in this slide you can see an example of how the chatbot is able to pull from its new custom knowledge base in giving advice. And so I think overall, to conclude, I'm a big educational AI optimist. I believe in the good news of AI in education, and so I do believe predictive and generative AI hold great promise in enhancing educational outcomes, but they need to follow certain key principles. One, the value of equity. Making sure that the data that we're collecting that's being used to train these AI systems are attached to robust information about students, about teachers, so that regardless of who we're serving, regardless of the geographic location, of the economic development status, of the student's personal background, these tools are not harming them in an egregious way. We also need to make sure these AI technologies are aligned with the evidence on what actually works in education, and that we're connecting people across disciplines, across fields, with a teacher, an education researcher, a technologist, an instructional designer, so that we can engineer a classroom that is not just having technologically cool, trendy, or glamorous tools for students to play with, but we're actually creating a learning experience that can improve educational outcomes. Yep, so overall, I'm really excited to talk more about this work, and thank you all for this opportunity to share.